This is Marketing Jam, a show featuring the brightest minds in marketing. Marketing Jam is brought to you by Cyber Impact, the email marketing platform made specifically for Canadian small businesses. Go to cyberimpact.com/jelly, create a free account, and start sending CASL-compliant promotional emails in just a few clicks.
Hey, welcome back to Marketing Jam. Shaheed Devji here. Thank you for joining us. We have a very special guest today. Cybele Negris is the co-founder and CEO of Webnames.ca. Cybele, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You drove all the way out to Fort Langley, and you said, is it not your first time here, or is it your first time here?
It's not my first time here. It's absolutely beautiful, though.
Yeah.
It's 24 degrees out.
24 degrees in March. We're really lucky in Vancouver. We usually complain about the weather here in Vancouver, so a nice day. Thanks for joining us. Why don't you tell our audience about Webnames.ca? I read on the website you're called Canada's original domain registrar, and that's probably true. You're not just saying that because you've bbeen around for 20 plus years, and part of your the people who co-founded you is a man who started the .ca registry. So maybe tell our audience what Webnames.ca is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually quite a unique story. So John Demko, who you're referring to, we call him the godfather of .ca. John actually founded the .ca domain name in 1987. So this was pre-commercialization of the internet. And really, he was involved in one of the first connections between US and Canada. He was working at UBC, and he was interested in naming, and decided that Canada needed its own domain name. So .com came out in 1985. .ca came out in 1987. He wrote a letter to another John Postel at the time, and John Postel ran the organization that basically delegates domain names and IP addresses, and said, I think I have the ability to run a something for Canada. And they were actually looking at either a .ca or a .cdn. They decided on the .ca, even though they thought maybe it might be a bit confusing in terms of California. Yeah. But
and then there's the CAN, which Canada is known as in other ways, in sports specifically, right?
But most of the all the CCTLDs, the country code top level domains in the world, are 2 letters. So they decided on the CA.
US is one of them,
and CN now is China.
Okay.
So it's good that they decided on the CA.
Was that just coincidence that he decided on that, and then everyone else was 2 letters after the fact?
You know what? I don't know that. I should actually ask him. Yeah. But it's. I think it was probably a standard that was becoming more common, so they just stuck with that. So ultimately, he ran that registry for 13 years for free. He never charged a single dollar for running that registry. So up until about 2000, you could get a .ca name for free.
Okay.
So I met him in 1999, 2000, and thought, this guy is absolutely incredible. I was enjoying the story that he was telling. I was doing some contract work in the industry liaison office at UBC at the time. It was called the UILO. I had exited a different company, and so I heard this story of this guy who had been doing this for free, and I thought, wow, what an amazing person. And I sat down with him and was just completely intrigued in what he was doing. So I went to his office, and I could see like stacks of papers stacked behind the door, thinking, what is he up to? So essentially, he was taking, ironically, domain registrations manually.
On paper.
So you would have to email him the registration. You would have to fax in documentation to prove who you were. Yeah. And in order to get your .ca domain name, you had to be federally incorporated. So you couldn't actually get your business name .ca unless you were federally incorporated or had multiple offices in more than one province. Otherwise, you would have to get your name .bc.ca or .ons.ca.
Yeah.
And if you were an individual, you would have to get your name .vancouver.bc.ca.
Oh, wow.
Or, like every city had its own geographical delineation. So that's the way things were set up.
And how times have changed. You just need to be a resident of Canada to get a .ca.
Exactly, or a trademark. You have to be a trademark owner.
Yeah, and within minutes now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But we started, to take registrations online. We built a website. We worked with the tech transfer manager at the time at the UILO. Brought in somebody to develop the website. He was coding, and I would be writing the content, and we'd get things up and running. And then we ended up packaging up the technology, and we sold it to the Canadian Internet Registration Authority.
Right.
So they became the registry and the wholesaler, and then we became one of the accredited registrars.
Right. So registrars like GoDaddy and Domain.com and all, there's so many of them now.
Lots of them.
You were playing in that space quite early on in 2000, right?
Yeah.
What was that like, working in sort of the .com boom?
Yeah, it was tons of fun. We went from 3 to 30 people in 4 months, and we did $2.5 million in our first year of operations. Wow. So that was pretty crazy, and we only sold one product. So the growth was tremendous. We had a tiny little office at UBC, at the University of British Columbia, and people slept in sleeping bags. Just like, we couldn't keep up with the demand because the rules for .ca opened up, and all this demand, all this pent-up demand was there. So we basically capitalized on an opportunity that was pretty short-lived, because then after we realized that we've got all these customers with their .ca domain name, but what do they do? Right? They can't use it for email, they couldn't use it for hosting, and we thought, we either have to sell these customers to another company that had the infrastructure to deliver on these other services, or we would have to build. And this is 19 years later. Exactly. We built.
How long did it take you to come to that realization and to become what you are today?
Yeah, it was pretty quick. I think in tech, you just have to build fast. And initially, we partnered, and we didn't build everything from scratch. But it was pretty quick in terms of having to deliver on those types of services. Otherwise, we would start losing customers.
Right.
But today we have over 800 different domain extensions, not just .ca. And then we do email, hosting, digital certificates. We did web development for a number of years as well. So lots of different types of services that are associated with domain names.
Yeah. So John had the foresight to create the registry back then.
Yeah.
But I mean, you must have had some sort of inclination that this was the right place to be. Would you say that, or did you just kind of happen upon it and then take a chance? So what was your thinking like in 1999 when you met him and then sort of taking those next steps to taking orders online, like you said, and then eventually getting to selling the registry and starting the company? Like, what kind of foresight did you have personally?
Yeah, so I guess you could call me a serial entrepreneur. I had been in the pharmaceuticals business. I was employee number 3, and we took that through an IPO. And then I took an exit a few years later. I then started a construction company. So we were building, luxury homes in the West Point Grey area, as well as some commercial places in downtown Vancouver. So I was always looking for opportunity and looking for good people that I wanted to work with. And when I met John, I realized, number one, he had an amazing idea. The fact that he was such a visionary for the country. And he came from an era of the internet where individuals didn't do things for profit. The internet is built on individuals like John, who had this foresight and wanted to share knowledge and expertise, and that's really what the internet was built for. Yeah. It was never intended to sell products and services online or advertising online.
Which it feels like it's all that it's for now, right?
Yeah, I mean, in this generation, if you were to grow up in this generation, you would have never known that that's how the internet started. But it was, people who were in universities trying to communicate with each other and trying to do something good. So, I think I was just very attracted to working with somebody like that who was a visionary, and the fact that he'd been recognized by a prime minister at the time as a pioneer of the Canadian internet. I was just very attracted to working with somebody like that. Didn't know where things were going to go. And honestly, it was like, this is exciting. We knew there was going to be a huge opportunity for .ca with the rules being liberalized. But let's go for it and see what happens. And things happened.
What did you think back then and now even the purpose of the .ca was and is? Has it changed? Is it simply to delineate between a Canadian property and otherwise back then and now? What's your answer to that?
Yeah, so I think .ca still has a lot of value, as you say, to delineate between a Canadian business or entity or an individual from all the other choices that are out there. .com is obviously still king, and for a multinational organization, you should have your .com. And if it's still available. Most of the good names, unfortunately, in the .com world, especially the short ones, are all gone. Yeah. And if you wanted to buy it in what we call the aftermarket, it can be extremely expensive. And then that's why ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN for short, they opened up the rules back in 2012 to allow basically anybody to own their own domain name. So little did they realize that when you open things up, entrepreneurs were going to basically jump in, and they received 1,930 applications for different domain extensions. And I remember the first one, I think that came out from a company by the name of Donuts. Yeah. The first one that came out under the GTLD, the generic top-level domain space, was .bike. Okay. And then, things just started to release over the years, and that's why we offer over 800 of these domain extensions today. But .ca, I still feel, has so much value because it is reserved for Canadians. And if you're a Canadian business, you should definitely have your .ca, because even if you have the US division, or you have services around the world, if you have Canadian customers, it demonstrates to your Canadian customers that you're going to be paying Canadian currency, that when you're shipping products, that you're not going to have to pay for the duties and those types of things as they have to come over the border, because you're demonstrating that you're a Canadian business. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of value there, and there are Canadian presence rules, both for registrars and for the registrants, the individuals and the businesses who register their .cas. So if you're not Canadian, you shouldn't have a .ca. And I think it feels, I guess, for some people a little bit protectionist, but I think being Canada, we have such a small population that we should have, that, something that is our own and demonstrates the trust and the value of being Canadian. Yeah,
you talked about those Vanity domain extensions, right, which they've come to known as, and what is that still something? Was it a fad? Is it still something that you think is going to grow because the .coms and .cas are being swept up and have been swept up so quickly? Mm-hmm. Is that just the way the domain needs to go to allow for new entrants and registrants as you speak?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when you talk about the Vanity domains, some of the CCTLDs, the country code top level domains over the years, prior to this big launch in 2012, have been used for that purpose. So
like .us, right? Not .us.
Exactly. And then .io. Right. I think they've done a phenomenal job in marketing it to early startup tech companies, because IO is actually Indian Ocean, and most people don't realize that. But it sounds kind of cool. You've got a short name company that's .io, and people go, oh yeah, cool tech company, but it's actually Indian Ocean.
Because it's input-output, right? That's what it's supposed to stand for in the tech world. Yeah.
And then TV is actually Tuvalu.
Okay.
Right? So it's not actually television. So there's some neat little things that some of these countries
and maybe they don't have the
done.
same type of rules to protect against people.
Exactly.
Swoop them up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with the island of Tuvalu, it was kind of their big industry, like selling their .tv domain name, right? Because it's such a small population there. But with these new TLDs that came out, there were well over 1,000 of them that are out there now, ranging from .ninja to .yoga and so forth. And there's some kind of like fun ones like that. But there are some that are very niche, like .law or .lawyer for the legal industry.
.film is one of those too.
Yeah.
I was looking at it the other day, and you can't actually register unless you have proof that you're for the film industry.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it serves a specific purpose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And .eco, they're also locals here from Vancouver. They won the .eco bid, which was nice to see. They have run basically .eco in what we call a sponsored domain space, where you have to have something to do with being environmentally friendly and so forth in order to get your domain. And I think they've done a pretty good job in reserving that space for that purpose.
Okay, so back to what Webnames does as a business. You're talking about the .ca being important for Canadian businesses to show their clients and customers that they're Canadian and that they can be trusted to be in Canada and operate in Canada. Webnames.ca has a .ca for a specific reason, I'm assuming, and I wonder if part of that is, with all the talk about privacy and data protection these days, and all the the glitches and breaches we've had in the last several years, how important is it for you to be a Canadian company operating in Canada, and how important do you think it is for customers to know that they're operating with a Canadian with their data, and is from start to finish, does Webnames sort of keep that data when it comes to hosting in Canada, or is it also overseas as well?
Yeah, no, all of our data is here in Canada, and that is how we market. Our customer base is predominantly Canadian. We have some multinational organizations and big brands that are with us, and Fortune 500 companies, but the majority of our customers are still Canadian. And that's why we're very protective of our namesake, Webnames.ca. And the data, we take a lot of pride in keeping all of our data here in Canada, and that is how we market it in terms of keeping your data within the country. It's not subject to the Patriot Act, and it's subject to Canadian laws, not American laws.
Has that always been a priority for you, or is that kind of ramped up in the last few years?
No, it's been a priority for us since day one. So we've been in business for 19 years. We've basically kept Webnames.ca as our brand. We have been very proud to be Canadian, 100% Canadian owned. We don't outsource, whereas a lot of our competition, I realize it's a lot cheaper to have developers or call centers in other countries like the Philippines or in Russia and so forth, in Indonesia. But we take pride very much in the security of the data of our customers, and we want to be employing Canadians. So from day one, we've always employed Canadians, and we've always made it a policy not to outsource.
Yeah, so I was watching a video about the core values at Webnames.ca, and one of them was the service, and the excellence in service. And I'm assuming that's one of the ways you market and differentiate from your competitors, is that Canadian-based service, that quick service. But I still wonder, with the big names that we've talked about, how it's been so long, and you've still been able to survive competing with those big players. What's the secret? How have you been able to compete with these big players and their big marketing dollars, and I'm sure other advantages that comes along with being one of those big players, and not that you're not, but
Yeah.
what's the struggle been like, and then how have you been able to overcome that struggle?
Yeah, so differentiation is through a couple of things, and number one is our core values. And our core values, we have three of them, and first and foremost is to amaze every customer with exceptional service. Number two is to always be improving, and number three is to make a positive difference. And we don't just say these words, we live and we believe in it, and these core values are in giant red letters on our wall. And for each and every office that we've moved to, that is the first thing that we move, right? So when we were hunting for a new office space, the first question was, do we have a wall big enough for our giant red letters of our core values to be put back up on the wall again, before thinking about furniture placement or anything like that. We need room for our core values.
Right.
And that means when people come in, they interview with us, they walk in the door, they see the core values. When we have meetings and we talk about, should we be doing this or should we be doing that, we always go back to whether these decisions are aligned to our core values. And if they don't, then that's the decision that we don't do. Right? So everything that we do, we live and breathe our core values. And when we talk about our quarterly employee awards, same thing. Who within the company has gone above and beyond and live our core values, and therefore should be deserving of our Employee of the Quarter award. So everything we do, we talk core values first and foremost.
Yeah. And then sort of, has that been enough? Because obviously the product, I don't know, does it differentiate a whole lot between your competitors? It seems to be, quite similar, right? In the domains and the email and the hosting. Mm-hmm. Has the core values been enough, or has there been, marketing or other things that you've done that have helped, set you apart from maybe the U.S. international counterparts that you have?
Yeah, so domain names on their very own are a commodity. Mm-hmm. So the core values definitely help because that translates into retention of amazing people, and therefore these amazing people who've been with us for 10, 15, up to 19 years with me, deliver that exceptional service to our customers. So if you were to talk to any of our customers, that is the first thing that they will say. Yeah, Webnames, they'll actually answer the phone within 60 seconds. They'll pick up and you can talk to a live person. And that's something that our customers really value. And
it makes sense. I mean, I think of myself, and I bought my first domain name with GoDaddy, and I haven't switched since. And I don't know why I haven't switched. It's just comfortable staying there. So if you provide service on top of that, I'm sure it goes a long way, right? Yeah.
So besides the service, though, and honestly, like a part of our business, we go head to head with GoDaddy on the retail side of our business, is what we call it. So small businesses and individuals who would buy a domain name and a hosting account, maybe a few emails here and there. But a big part of our business is actually, we call it our corporate services, and it's completely different than what GoDaddy offers.
Right.
So these are large Canadian corporations typically that have huge domain portfolios. So there are companies out there that register hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of domain names, and they require some management of those domain portfolios. So they may have to do bulk DNS changes in the evenings, and we have staff that will sit up with them at 2:00 in the morning and handhold that process to make sure there's no downtime. We have very specific ways of handling invoicing that are tied to the needs and the accounting systems of large corporations, government, and municipalities, and so forth. We deal a lot as well with the universities and schools and so forth that also have fairly unique needs of how they do business. So that's a big part of our business, and that's a very profitable part of our business. That GoDaddy, they don't offer that level of service, so it's completely different.
So as you were saying, part of the Webnames.ca story is the fact that you're a serial entrepreneur, and then you kind of met John and have gone on this journey together. What is it that makes you a serial entrepreneur? What is it about you that is interested in starting businesses and making them successful?
Yeah, I think I'm just very naturally aligned with seeing opportunity in everything around me. So that is actually a challenge, because if you're an entrepreneur, typically you will see opportunities everywhere, and sometimes focus is a little bit difficult. So I think I suppose I've got the discipline of actually hunkering down and running the business, but I'm also very cognizant that if I start to get bored on certain things, I'm not the person to now go into the detail. I'm more involved in the strategic part of the business, and I have amazing people in the company that run the day-to-day that allow me to do a lot of different things where I'm bringing value to the company in terms of trust and credibility and so forth. I do a lot of speaking and all of that, where I don't have to be there day to day to make sure that the finances
Right.
are the bills are being paid, and that our customers are happy. We have amazing people who are awesome at what they do, and that's what they're charged to do, and they're way better at it than I am.
So as a co-founder, did you jump right into the CEO role when things started up, or did it take some time?
Yeah, it took some time actually. So I started out being very shy and behind the scenes, and I didn't want to be the face of the organization. It took me a number of years to really come into my own leadership style and to really feel the confidence to be able to lead the team. I think I was always thinking of myself as the workhorse behind the scenes doing all the work, and I'd stay up all night long and not sleep, but I never wanted to be the face of the company.
A lot of the time with CEOs, that just comes with the territory of wanting to run the company. That's just almost an afterthought, right?
Exactly. Let's just get the work done.
Yeah.
And then what I realized was, being a woman in technology, that I was getting a lot of media attention, and because the company was growing, and the media wanted to talk to me. I had a couple of male partners that the media kept coming to me, and then a lot of the speaking opportunities started coming, and I was terrified of public speaking, but kind of pushed myself to do more and more and more of it, where today I'm probably speaking at 30 or 40 speaking engagements a year, if not more.
Right. So what's the difference between being a woman working in tech and a woman CEO in tech now than it was when you first took the reins as CEO?
Yeah.
What are some of the experiences that you had, and how are you different today than you were back then?
Yeah, things have changed a lot. In the beginning, there were very few women in the tech space. Today, there are a whole lot more, and we are having the conversations today out there that there aren't enough women in technology. Back then, that is just the way it was.
Right.
And nobody talked about it, and it was one of those things that you kind of accepted, or go do something else. The other thing that I think I realized was there were a lot of things that I just kind of accepted, and I don't regret it at all, because I actually feel, when people ask me, so you must have gone through a lot of obstacles and challenges in order to get to where you are as a woman in technology, and said, that's true. But on the other hand, I just feel I'm blessed in the fact that I've had to go through and kind of fight my way a little bit into the industry, that it's made me stronger and more resilient. And honestly, as a female, I tell the younger female entrepreneurs today is, when you're in a room and it's 100 guys and it's you and a handful of women, guess who gets all the attention? right? So don't look at it as an obstacle, look at it as an advantage, and use it.
Yeah.
Don't always think of everything as a challenge, and how are you going to turn that around and use it to your own advantage?
Yeah.
So, but I've had experiences where I'd walk into a room with a male partner, and automatically I was looked at as either the spouse or the executive assistant of the male partner until they realize I'm the CEO. And that still happens sometimes today, where somebody will automatically think, oh, so what's your role? Do you do HR, or are you in marketing? And because those are typically, like, even in the technology side of things, the typical female, considered the female roles, and very few women that are actually doing the coding, the development systems, or even in the tech support. And it is true. When we hire for those roles, very few women are still applying today. But the industry's changed. We don't do, even maybe it was 6 or 7 years ago, there were industry events at the Playboy Mansion, and showgirls walking around, and the women at the booths were considered booth babes. That doesn't happen anymore. And when you go to an industry event, there's a more equal representation of women speaking on panels instead of all men. And there have been many industry events where it's not a single woman on a panel. And today that's changed dramatically.
Yeah. And so as you're illustrating, that mindset has changed. But I'm curious to hear your answer as to why it's important for that, outside of just having gender equality at a base level. What can that gender equality bring to the table in terms of what companies can then do? Is there an answer to that you have in mind?
Oh, there's definitely an answer. I mean, there are many studies out there that having better diversity, and it's not just gender, but ethnicity and whatever else, like how we all talk about diversity and inclusion today, is really about bringing more different types of thinking to the table, right? If you have all men who are all white, of all the same age group, you're only probably going to get a fairly narrow stream of thought. And there are studies today that demonstrate that the more diversity and more women on a board of an organization is not just the right thing to do, that it is the smart and financially better thing to do, because it serves the companies better. They're financially more profitable and more successful by having more women on their boards and in their senior executive teams.
So you said that you are speaking 30 to 40 times a year. What do you find yourself talking about most? Is it tech related, or is it more what we're talking about right now, or what is it? And what do you want to talk about the most?
Yeah, so a lot of the conversations, was tech. A lot of them talking to younger entrepreneurs or students and so forth. So I do quite a large number of speaking engagements for that purpose, and just sharing experiences of being an entrepreneur and being just the entrepreneurial journey, which is something that I get asked to speak to quite a bit. I was recently asked to lecture at the Schulich School of Business for the International MBA program at York University. And that was such an amazing thing to be able to do. These students are the top minds in their home countries, and some of them are from Canada as well. And to bring all these people together in one room in a small cohort of about 35 people, some of them came from super senior positions, either in government or in business. And they just wanted to hear my entrepreneurial journey, and I shared some of my ideas around that. That was fun and such an awesome experience. But I do like speaking to young entrepreneurs and to students. And then on the other side, I do a lot of talking about not necessarily gender equality, but I think these days more about the Imposter Syndrome,
Okay.
which is an article that I wrote about, I guess it would have been 2017. So what happened was I was chosen as one of the top 100 most powerful women in Canada. And this was probably, I would say, 8 or 9 years ago. And when I got the phone call, I actually thought somebody had made a mistake.
Oh.
And I thought, wow, did somebody mess up somewhere? It must have been a computer error. But I went to the event in Toronto, and there was 1,400 people at this event. And you can just imagine, 100 type A personality women all lining up to go into this giant room. And the music's blasting and the champagne's flowing. We walk into this room and everybody's doing a standing ovation and clapping. And then we had to walk up on stage, and I'm on the front row, right? And Lisa Lisson, who is she's the CEO of FedEx Canada, she grabbed my hand and she's dancing with me. And then we go and sit down, and I'm sitting beside Christine McGee, and on the other side, Jacqueline Chan. So Christine McGee's Sleep Country Canada. Jacqueline Chan invented Cold FX.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, wow, what am I doing here? There's FedEx and all these amazing companies. And then Margaret Atwood walks out, and she's doing the keynote, and she's also a winner of the award. And I thought, what am I doing here? And I actually felt almost embarrassed that I didn't feel like I deserved to be there. But then I ended up winning the award 4 times. And when you win the award 4 times, they induct you into the Hall of Fame. And even then, as I was going up on stage to accept my award and my video was playing, I just kept thinking, nobody knows who I am.
Sure.
Like what's going on? And then I started talking to some of the other winners and other Hall of Fame inductees over the years, and I started to realize that I wasn't the only person feeling that way. Like we were all feeling that way. So many of us, not all of us, but some of us were feeling that way. And I decided to kind of look into this issue, because why do so many women, feel that we don't deserve to be there? That we
and
don't
even
deserve.
If it's women amongst women, right?
Yeah, women amongst women, and some of these companies were huge companies of huge banks, and I remember this one woman who was speaking to me, and she was in a very senior role at one of the top banks in Canada, and she said, Cybele, I wish I had the guts to start my own business. I worked my way up. Climbing the corporate ladder, and it just became my time. It was just promotion to promotion, but I never had the guts to do my own thing. So she was looking at me as, wow, you started your own business and you're so successful, and she didn't deserve to be there. She was diminishing her own accomplishments, whereas on the flip side, I'm looking at her thinking, wow, she leads this massive company, that I didn't deserve to be there. So we were doing it ourselves to ourselves. So I wrote this article, and it was published in Business in Vancouver about the imposter syndrome. And then all these speaking engagements came as a result of that. Everybody wanted me to come and talk about my experience and feeling like an imposter, because I declared openly in that article that day that this is my deepest, darkest secret, and I am the ultimate imposter because I'm the CEO and founder of a tech company, and I don't have a tech background.
Do you still feel that today at points in time, or have you gone past that?
Yeah, at points. So I actually just wrote a second article, follow-up article, to basically delve into it a little bit more. Now that it's 2 years past that article, I've spoken about it. I've spoken to so many people about it who have now written to me, who are PhDs and so forth. Dr. Valerie Young, who wrote the book about the imposter syndrome, I actually had to open for her one day. and be the keynote opening for the woman who wrote the book on the Imposter Syndrome. So think about the Imposter Syndrome of that.
Yeah, exactly. Probably a little bit of that there.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, we've we totally got on, and we're actually going to be meeting again soon. But it's one of those topics that I think it resonates with a lot of people. And what I've realized is that you go through stages in life where it's actually okay to be a little bit scared, right? Like, in fact, I tell people now that I do things that I'm afraid of at least once a week now. Speaking in front of a video and speaking in public was not my natural place to be. In fact, I was so scared of it, I dropped out of commerce at UBC to avoid public speaking. But challenging yourself and stepping out of your comfort zone to do something that you're afraid of, consistently helps you become comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I try to do that quite a bit today, and I think that's helped me. But of course, I still, with everything that I do, when I go to that next challenge, I start to have those feelings creep up again. So when I joined a board a couple of years ago, and it was a pretty major national board, I went there and I thought, wow, I don't really deserve to be here. All these seasoned board members, what do I do? So I got prepared. I read, I think it was 7 years of financial statements and everything that was archived. I spent days and probably weeks studying the material before my orientation day. And then during orientation day, I was taking notes and paid attention to almost every single word that was said to make sure that I was fully prepared to add value. Which I feel now that I am, for sure, that, I learned every part of that business, during the first few months, because I didn't want to take 2 years to get to know the organization and then be able to give back. So I think now that's another part of my strategy is, if you feel that, you don't belong and you don't deserve to be there, well, get prepared. Make sure that you can deliver.
I'm sure a lot of our audience, viewers and listeners, in hearing parts of your entrepreneurial journey, dropping out of commerce at UBC and the starting up in tech there and pharmacy, as you talked about, I've been able to glean a lot. But what's up with maybe it being really easy to want and think of starting up a business right now these days, not necessarily getting the financial means to do so, but what advice can you give to people who are starting their own businesses today and in that startup phase and then feeling those feelings of maybe not belonging or just not necessarily knowing whether they're going to succeed or not? What type of advice can you give them?
Yeah, I think you should look within yourself and try to determine whether you are a true entrepreneur or not. I think there is a very low barrier to entry nowadays to starting your own business. I see many startups starting and a lot failing. And people don't realize how hard it is because it's glamorized, right? It seems so great when you hear the success stories of all these people who have gone out there and built these amazing businesses that sound awesome. What you don't see behind the scenes are all the multiple failures before that, all the sleepless nights, the true blood, sweat, and tears that goes into building a business, and times when companies are feeling that they can't make payroll. Many companies are financed and they're losing their runway, and they know they probably can't survive for another month. Those gut-wrenching feelings that an employee of a company never has to feel, because they're doing their work and they could be doing amazing work, but they don't have to think about that. Whereas the business owner has to do all of that and think of the strategy, how to move forward, but at the same time, it's not just their own paycheck, it's the paycheck and the responsibility of having all these staff and their families to feed as well. It's way harder than most people think it is. So I love it when there are people out there talking about their failures, because it helps to demonstrate that it's not all roses, right? It is so hard to run a business and to run a successful business that is long term. I know so many businesses that have to sell. They don't have a choice to keep going, because they've taken investors pretty early on. And the investors, after close to 10 years, are like, okay, that's it.
Back. Yeah.
There's no more is coming. You have to be growing at 3 times, at 3x every year, and that's what investors are expecting. And if you're not growing at that rate, it's easy when you're going from 5,000 to 15,000 to 60,000, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. So once you're into the millions, to 3x is way harder, and it gets progressively harder. And so many of the companies, especially in particular in Canada, they have to sell to a bigger American company. We've had lots of offers, and I've declined many of them, all of them so far. Yeah. Just because I want to keep Webnames.ca Canadian, and keep the staff here in Canada. And if we get swallowed up by a big American company, I know they're not going to keep the Webnames brand, and they're probably not going to keep any of the staff. So it's important to me to kind of uphold that legacy that John built, so many years ago. And, as the stewards of .ca in the beginning, I just feel it's important to keep things going here in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm hearing you correctly, to entrepreneurs, it's be willing to put in the work.
Absolutely.
Because there's no way, no other way to do it.
Yeah, it's the work and the resiliency. So, when things are super tough, do you have what it takes to pick yourself up,
keep going,
and to keep going? Yeah. And a lot of people don't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, this has been amazing. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today? I'm sure, like I said, there's so much that people can take away from a lot of our audience, small businesses, looking to grow and coming to us for marketing advice. But the business advice is just as important, if not more important. So, anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, get your .ca. If you're Canadian, get your .ca domain name, and there are lots and lots of resources out there for those that want to start their businesses in Canada. Small Business BC here locally in British Columbia. Female entrepreneurs should go to fwe.ca. There's so many resources available for the startup community. I know across Canada, Startup Canada has done a phenomenal job as well. Futurepreneur for those that are under the age of 39. They have a national network as well. So lots and lots of resources for those that are starting up.
Perfect. Well, Cybele Negris from Webnames.ca, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Enjoy Fort Langley for the rest of your day here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.